Welcome back to The Few Show. My name is Jim, and I'm the co-founder of Xfusion.io and the co-host of The Few Show. I'm excited to be joined by my guests today, Ken Knecht and Dr. Kate Cordell. Kate is the co-founder and CEO of Opeeka. She leads Opeeka as the Principal Investigator, Health Services Data Scientist, and Researcher. Ken is a veteran in software design and digital marketing with over 25 years of experience working with hundreds of businesses from brand conception to multi-channel marketing. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's jump right into it. So tell us a little bit more about what Opeeka is and the audience that you serve.
Sure, I can do that. So Opeeka was born out of really frustration, having had my own consulting company for the past 10 years, solving the same problem over and over in mental health and behavioral health care. Realized that there needed to be a better solution for unifying information across the system of care, where people with complex needs, which includes most people with moderate to severe mental illness and other social challenges, they really need to have a unified care plan where a multidisciplinary team can work together and provide that care, because it's hard enough for them with multiple care plans. There's just no way that they can achieve recovery and resilience. And so we had been solving that problem with technology for 10 years in consulting projects. Okay. And so it just, after the consulting project ended, the technology wasn't supported. So we set out to build an enterprise solution that would unify that information across the system.
Okay. So it's a software platform for effectively mental health medical records. Is that roughly accurate?
Well, mental health is not always in the primary care space. So they're not always called medical records. So on occasion, it's a very complex field, right? But it's very fragmented. On occasion, there are mental health providers that sit within primary care, and there will be a mental health medical record. Majority of the time, there is not. There are these various health records, as they're called, by providers who may be community-based providers or single providers, like single, hang a shingle kind of provide mental health services. Okay. Grassroots providers, a lot of Christian and religious organizations do provision of care for social services and mental health. So it falls like in this very fragmented space where information is maybe captured, maybe not, maybe in a health record, maybe not. And so what ends up happening is it's just very difficult to coordinate that care across the various types of treatments and interventions that these families and people need. And so that's been the challenge.
So
the data, I'll just add that data is most often siloed in these different organizations.
Okay.
And that's a huge problem when we look at person-centered care. We want to build a story around that person in care, and that can be multiple providers that serve that person.
Okay. I want to talk to you about adoption challenges, but first, can you give us some use case examples? I mean, like where is this predominantly being used at this point?
Yeah, so we launched basically earlier this year.
Okay.
So predominantly in community-based providers that provide different types of services. So they have multidisciplinary teams that may provide social care, foster care, and mental health services. But the problem is all of the regulations at the state and federal level for these different disciplines have their own sets of rules. And so you can't have one team log in and see the same record for a person. They're all by law only required to see certain types of information. So our system comes in and organizes what folks can see and how they can best work together. Otherwise, they're doing things on paper because they don't have a system that allows them to see what the laws support them to see.
Oh, God bless you guys. Like, this sounds next to impossible because, I mean, all the fragmentation and legacy system, I mean, it sounds like an absolutely massive undertaking.
It does, but it's not. So that's the beauty of what we did, right? So all of these systems are system oriented. Like they think about the laws and the rules, the regulations and the billing and what are the workflow of the person, the staff. And there's these very convoluted systems that work for one scenario. And what we've done is we flipped that on its head and we've said, hey, you know what really matters? The person being served. What if we orient all the data and information around that person, and then it's so much simpler?
Yeah.
And we can tag each piece of information around that person as to who gets to see it. Simple as that. It ends up being the person's the center of the universe. the person in care, and everything else revolves around them. And all of a sudden, all that complexity that are built into these systems falls away.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know you all are just getting started, and congrats on your seed round, by the way. That's exciting. So to date, what have been the challenges with adoption, getting people to convert from legacy systems to this new, better, patient-centered approach?
Yeah, definitely there have been our share of challenges. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is when you're doing a technology that is a bit disruptive, it doesn't replace another technology that's already there. So the biggest challenge is for folks to see how it fits in within the ecosystem of technology that they're already using or struggling with. And so having to diagram out how we fit together in their workflow or their solution without showing how we're reducing that burden is been the biggest challenge, I think, for us, is just getting people's mind wrapped around. It's not going to be yet another, technology that's come in and disrupt your workflow and cause you these issues. It's actually going to remove the burden and make your workflow easier.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think, dual entry, nobody wants to do dual entry. And that's against our thesis as a company, to have somebody have to do dual entry, because we know how, tapped, especially now, the workforce is. And asking them to do more is not what we're about. So getting people to understand that we just kind of sit on top of everything and do our work in the background, and doesn't change the day-to-day workflow.
Okay.
Except for the better.
Except for the better.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious, why do you all care? Like, what is your big why behind this mission in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think we both have, I think everybody in our company so far has lived experience and has frustration seeing how fragmented the system is. I can speak to my family having a number of, immediate family members and extended family members with mental illness, severe mental illness, seeing them try to navigate the system, if they even try at all, it's frustrating and impossible. The chances that somebody with severe mental illness is going to recover in a system really depends on luck in who they get to support them, and that person staying consistent throughout their care. And for the majority of people, that doesn't happen. They tell and retell their story over and over to clinician and practitioner and person after person, trying to cobble together some sort of medication, treatment, modification of lifestyle, and it just doesn't work because already they're challenged with these health issues. And now you're asking them to coordinate across these various providers that don't speak to each other.
Yeah.
And it fails. It's not a system that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Kate, family history of mental illness as well, very close to it. And then when I started working with Kate about 6 years ago, she brought me in on a few projects, and I just saw, I knew there was a problem with the data and trying to use data to look at outcomes. I didn't realize how big the problem was. And so I'm a problem solver, and I like to solve problems. That's what I've done my whole career. And so I saw this as a huge problem, and we set out to solve it through an enterprise solution.
That's great. Yeah, I've had personal experience with, my wife and I were in therapy in Oklahoma, and then we moved to Colorado, and like the thought of starting with a new therapist is exhausting because there's so much foundation that we've laid with the previous therapist. So it's not like we're unwilling, but man, it's a big hill to climb.
Yeah. What our software does, it builds a story. We call it a story map. It builds a story around that person in care. So when you have a new provider come in and they can look at that at a glance, it's kind of like an infographic about your history and what's happened, your past history, your trauma and things you've experienced. So you don't have to, re-traumatize by having to explain that again.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we do. Our software is called Person-Centered Intelligence Solution, PIECES for short. So it really is person-centered, building a story about that person in care to help other providers facilitate care.
That's great.
Yeah. You highlight success. So not only is it telling, your history and your story, but it's also showing the progress you've made to date, showing the symptoms and the resilience factors that you've addressed and built. And so it's not just saying, here's, Fred with all these issues. It's saying, here's Fred, look at how far he's come.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, it's super. I'm sure the therapist really appreciates having that information. It gives them a head start as well, and they know where to begin the journey with that particular patient.
Definitely, and then there's in this industry in healthcare, there's a lot of turnover. So a lot of information, since it's based on intuition mostly, is lost when somebody leaves a program. So when somebody else comes to pick that up, it's really important to have that data to be able to kind of help you with your work with that person and not have to start from ground zero.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you all about how you support children in foster care. My wife and I have been foster parents for over a decade, and we're adoptive parents as well. So it's something that is extremely important. So we've worked in supporting foster kids in 3 different states, in Texas, Oklahoma, and Colorado, and the differences among them are incredible. Quite shocking, actually, in the way that they do things. But I'm curious what work is you guys do with foster children and families.
Yeah, so our software focuses on any individual or family with complex needs that it has a multidisciplinary team of care. And foster youth are, of course, at the top of the list there, where they have school mental health, they have potentially probation, they they have a probation officer potentially, they have mental health services with a provider. Maybe they have some primary care issues, and then that's constantly changing as they're moving around. So they are kind of the highest, priority for our solution, because we can unify that story for them across those different providers, because we're not just medical based. We're data agnostic.
Okay.
And so because we can unify any piece of information about a person, we don't have to stick in a medical record. We can bring in that social services information, that probation information, that school tardiness or absence information as well, so that if a child doesn't show up for school with an unexcused absence, then that same day the social worker can be notified. So that immediate, to make sure that that child's safe, right? So that immediate feedback and building of that story is what we do. So we are working to unify information across those different providers so they can build out a single a single care plan for that kiddo in care, that can then be transferred if that child changes placements. That care plan can be continuous throughout those different placements, and the new family or placement where the child's at has an ability to quickly see, without having to notes and reports. They can quickly see the progress the child's made.
That's so useful. It's so difficult to have fragmented information and incomplete information from so many different sources. The picture is just so incomplete, and I don't know, that's amazing. I wish that was in place when we were experiencing our journey. Yeah, good for you all. I want to transition a little bit to the business and you all running the business. I'm curious what each of you do sort of day to day in your roles in the business.
Yeah, I'm Chief Marketing Officer, also co-founder. So when Kate and I met, we started putting the business together very early on. So I'm a real creative guy. So Kate's got this genius brain, and I basically take her ideas and her chicken scratch drawings and turn them into pieces of art.
Okay.
So really, our first product consisted of mock-ups that we stitched together to go out and show people and see if we could build interest. So our first product was a high fidelity mock-up that we went out and pitched to investors and pitched to potential customers to see if there was interest, and there was.
That's great.
Yeah.
What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I literally do draw chicken scratches and stick pictures on pieces of paper and hand them to him and say, I want this. This is how it needs to work. That is exactly right. So, but yeah, so I am, I'm also assistant professor doing research at University of Kentucky Center for Innovation Population Health, where I'm looking at, how do people recover in care? What does resilience look like? If you have a teenager who has at risk for suicide, what is it that happens first, second, third, fourth for them to recover and become more resilient? And how do we repeat that pathway for people who look like that child? So every child's going to have a reason related to that suicide risk that's different, but there are going to be common threads between certain stories. And so how do we understand those stories and understand the commonalities so that we can reuse that information? And so I have built out over the year a number of success-focused models, so success-focused AI models that I've published in peer-reviewed journals. And so what I bring to the table then is this data science knowledge and research on, I know how to use the data. I'm a data architect as well, and so I know how to model the data. So I bring in the data science, the data modeling, the AI, and then I understand the domain expertise around the workflow that folks are doing in care. So then I stitch that together in what would be a solution, usually, like I said, on a piece of printer paper, stick figures, and bring that over to Ken for him to build out and mock up, and then we build a technology around it.
It's a really symbiotic relationship where Kate does what she does really, really well. I do what I do really well, and together we're quite a force. It's been really.
That's awesome. I was telling you all off air that of all the interviews we've done on the Few Show, this is my first to have both co-founders present. I want to take advantage of that opportunity. So I'm curious, a lot of founders are considering whether or not they would like to work with a co-founder versus go it alone. And then those that end up working together try to figure out what's the best way to delineate responsibility, handle conflict, et cetera. I guess delineate different roles. So how have you all, I know it's a broad question, but I'm curious how you all have handled that in your partnership.
Yeah, that's a good question. For us, it's been really seamless. I think we both know each other really well. We know our strengths. We know our weaknesses. Pick up for one another when something maybe falls through the cracks. One of us is there to pick it up. So the way we work was like one unit. I couldn't see myself running this business alone. I don't think Kate would see herself running this business alone. I think it's she and I have both developed this relationship where we really watch each other's backs and we really pick up after each other and stay in our lanes as well. Like I said, Kate's the data scientist. I won't touch data, but I'll take something that she creates and make it look pretty and functional. So it's been, like I said, it's almost like we're one unit. It's hard to, I don't even see this as being a separate, or could never be a separate entity.
Yeah. I mean, I had the idea for this, or the vision for this, solution for, at least 8 years, and had pitched it, informally to other folks that I had, vendors or whatnot, or folks that I had worked with along the way, and never really found a fit. And I would not have gone it alone. I am somebody, I think, that does better when I can bounce ideas off and talk and get excited. And like, I couldn't imagine, I feel so bad for single founders. I wouldn't be able to, I don't know if I maybe not have the confidence or just maintain the energy level needed to do this. This is the hardest thing.
Yeah, hats off to those that do it alone.
I mean, on days that I'm down, he's down, days that he's down, I'm up, and like, I can't imagine you could get stuck in a rut as a single founder. Kudos to all those single founders out there that are doing it alone. Yeah. But I didn't launch I didn't even think about moving forward on that idea until I met Ken. And when I pitched it to him, and he was probably like the 5th or 6th person, I was like, hey, I got this idea. I really think this could be a product. What do you think? He was like, yeah. Here, I know exactly what you're saying. Let me, here's a mock the next day.
Yeah, I had the vision. When she explained it to me, I had the vision early on, and then being on these projects with her, working in the trenches, on seeing some of the issues firsthand, I really got an idea of what we need to do to make some impact.
Yeah. And I think it has to do with us both having similar lived experience.
Okay.
So it wasn't like I was pitching a foreign idea to him. He had seen, the consequences of it not working well.
I see. Yeah, I was talking to a founder just a few days ago about the value of knowing yourself. And I was sharing with him, I'm 39 now, and I feel like I'm just now getting to the point where I really understand my strengths and weaknesses. And that's a real advantage in my business partnership as well. And I'm curious, it sounds like that is true for both of you. And I'm curious if you all had started this, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, maybe at a time when you knew yourself less well, would it have been as successful?
No, I don't think so. Personally, like yourself, when I was much older than you are, but when I was at your age, I think there was a lot of self-discovery and things that you basically at that point, when you're young, you think you can do it all. Yeah. I think you have this mentality of I can take on anything, I can do anything, which is great. But the fact of the matter is you need help. And you need to get help from other people and be a team and realize that you have weaknesses that people can help you with.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly feel like I am more capable today than I ever have been in my entire life. And, I'm 46. But when I was 26, I don't think I could have thought or as clearly, worked as hard or as long, which is strange, or
Hmm.
even at 36. I think at this age, I am really hitting my stride finally. And I don't know if that's because, when I was younger, I had a lot of, laundry to fold and pack away. And I finally got to the point where I feel like, that at that level of confidence, and I'm allowing myself to be that productive. And I've put aside all of those things from when I was younger. But if I had tried this when I was younger, I would have gotten beat up so bad I probably would have given up because it's not easy. There is plenty of people that are going to tell you no, and this isn't going to work, and you're going to fail. And if you believe them, or you don't have confidence in yourself and your abilities and that experience behind it, like, no, I've done this. I did consulting for 10 years. I know how this works. I am a technologist. I do know how
Yeah.
to code. I do know how to work. I know how to build out this data model. This doesn't scare me. That I wouldn't have had 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I've been through a number of different businesses working with startups, and, some work, some don't. I think you got to take a few hits
Hmm.
to realize how that feels,
Hmm.
and know kind of what not to do. It's a life
Yeah.
lesson. It's like life. You go through things that are painful, and you learn from those
Yeah,
pains.
absolutely. There is a statistic, and I can't cite the source properly, but it showed that in general, founders that are older, I think north of 35, tend to do better than their younger counterparts. And I think there's a nice blend there, and there's always exceptions. What I've seen actually work fairly well is a young founder paired with an older co-founder. I think that can work out
Hmm.
well also. One more question on this topic, and then we can move on. How do you all handle conflict? So, Ken, if you want to go a certain direction, Kate doesn't, vice versa, how do you handle that situation? Or how will you if that hasn't
It's
come up?
it's funny you mentioned that. I think I told Kate yesterday, like we rarely uh, have confrontations that are negative. I mean, we see so much alike. I think we both have a very clear vision of what this
Mm.
company is and will be, and there's very rarely any conflict about what direction to go, because I think we're both very much on the same page, which is probably unique for a lot of co-founders. I'm sure there's a lot of I've actually worked in some startups where I've seen some close fights. I mean, real physical fights. So I always said to myself, I never want to be in a situation like that. So I think Kate and I we're so in sync on how we envision this business that there's rarely any conflict. I mean, Kate.
Yeah. Yeah. Just I wanted to put some more color to it, but like yesterday we were working on a pitch deck and I had mocked it up, and I know I'm not the most graphic, best graphic designer. That goes over to Ken. Once I know what I want to say, I put, I'll put together a stick figure pitch deck and hand it off to him to make it beautiful. But I did have one slide that I was a little bit attached to because I felt it conveyed a certain amount of emotion, right? And then his rendition of it, I was like, oh, you've lost the emotion that I was trying to capture
Yeah,
here.
and that was like that's a rare occasion. So I was a little upset about that. I was like, oh, I thought I knew, but I want to capture the vision that she has,
Yeah.
because so there's no problem. It was just a short-lived little little
Right. That's like,
disagreement.
Hmm.
it's so small. We're usually rowing in the same direction, but in that case, I was just like, I need that emotion back.
Yeah. Well, that's a good, timely example.
Yes.
I want to talk to you all about mental health for founders, and I think that goes into work-life balance. So I'm curious how you think of that. I know that I enjoy talking about mental health, therapy, et cetera, with founders. I feel like that there's an increasing amount of adoption among founders to be willing to discuss that, maybe provide benefits to their team, make it less taboo, et cetera. And again, I apologize for the broadness of the questions, but I'm curious how you all think about, I guess, taking care of yourselves and other founders from a mental health perspective.
And that's a great question. We've all, over the last few years, we've all as a race, as a human being, learned a lot about mental health.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, Kate and I were out pitching our ideas to investors in the Bay Area, and they didn't want to touch mental health. They didn't understand it. They didn't want to
Okay.
touch it. No interest at all. Nobody cared. Probably one of the only real silver linings of the pandemic was now that mental health is really under a microscope. People are looking at it. They're not afraid to talk about it. They're getting help for it, and that's kind of bleeding over into the workforce. We do a lot we found that our product works really well with workforces, workforce well-being. So that's an avenue we're looking at, getting into and doing a lot more in because it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think it starts with the language you use. So we promote success focused care through our product for our customers, but we also speak success focused internally in our organization. And so in terms of our employees, when we have annual reviews or we eat our own dog food, we use our own software for tracking on our own, what are those called? The company core values. Yeah. Our own core values, right? So tracking on our own core values about how our employees feel about the core values. We also, in our annual reviews, use success-focused language where it's not, if you look at a typical annual review, it's like, what have you done wrong? Where are the demerits? Mm-hmm. And it's where are your strengths? Mm-hmm. Where are your skills? What skills do you want to build? Is this a centerpiece skill or is this a skill to build? And we've flipped everything so that our language is always success focused. So if we're trying to solve a problem, we really focus on, how do we find success? How do we achieve success with that problem? Mm-hmm. Not, becoming stagnant and complaining. And we use a whole language around success. And I think we have a great team. We have so much fun. Everybody on our team, I think, has fun. We have game night every month and stuff. And so we just really gels because I think we really try to focus on helping everybody achieve success. And that's one way that I think internally we address mental health. I know externally I go out on hikes and I prioritize that. So sure. For me, it's like I need to get out into nature and prioritize that for myself. But
I think it's a communication with staff. An annual review that's once a year. I mean, I think doing pulse surveys in between to keep a pulse on how they're feeling, how they feel at their job, how they're feeling overall. And so when you get to that annual review, it's not again, it's kind of our software is building a story about that person. So when you get to the end of the year for the annual review, you kind of have a pulse on kind of where they're at already, and they feel like they're being heard, and you're addressing their needs personally. So I think it's just keeping those communications open and not having people siloed in their cubicles, bringing them together more.
Yeah. I'll have one more point to make on this, and I'm a process engineer. I'm always about, the way the data flows, the way the work flows, and what is the process. And, another thing we always say is if something goes wrong, where did the process break down? It's not whose fault it was. It's like, where did our process break down? How can we improve our process so that this doesn't break down that way again? So there's a lot less, there's not finger pointing, which I think helps with mental health as well. I think when you get organizations that have a lot of responsibility on people rather than process tend to have a lot more mental health concerns among them.
It's definitely something that's top of mind for us. Our org has been around for about a year and a half, and we have about 50 people, and we provide customer support to startups and have team in different locations, including Nairobi, Kenya, and then the Philippines. So we're trying to understand culture as well, and different cultures and different, I guess, willingness for transparency, vulnerability as it relates to mental health. And also just like we've had some of our team be suicidal, and we're trying to figure how do we handle this as a fully dispersed team? Where's the balance between privacy and us being involved? And we're just trying to navigate all that, and it's tough. And somewhat related, and tell me if this is too much, we can move on. But I'm curious how open you all are with each other and with your team from a transparency, vulnerability perspective in sharing your own mental health journey and any sort of challenges that you face. Is that something you keep pretty tight on, or are you open to sharing that?
I think we're pretty open. I mean, given the space that we're working in, I think it's pretty easy for us to be expressive of our own personal pains and trials and tribulations. But I think we've developed such a close relationship, just being able to talk with our staff and often enough to where they feel comfortable telling us things that some people might not be comfortable telling in other places.
How do you get over how can I phrase this? The perceived weakness or the fear of being perceived as weak. Now, this can be from you, Ken or Kate, or also just your staff. And let's say you have one of your leaders is struggling from a mental health perspective, and they don't want to be viewed as weak in front of you or not competent, et cetera. So how do you mitigate that?
Well, we have an advantage because, we support the field. So if you have lived experience, it gives you more credibility in our field than if you don't.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a little different for us because those with lived experience, they understand and they can really, when they're working with our customers, they can really speak with more compassion about the work that our customers are doing in mental health field. So unfortunately, where for our organization probably won't translate into other organizations and other cultures, because we always talk about, what we expect for our customers to do is be compassionate for the people they serve. And so, of course, then we are compassionate with each other in that same way.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we're coming up on time, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I do have one more question that I'd love for each of you to answer if you're willing. And that is, if you were to go back in your founder journey, now you can pick the time, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, and give advice to your younger self based on what you've learned during your journey, what would you say to yourself?
Myself personally, I would just say stay driven. I remember just having an entrepreneur mindset since I was in my early teens. So I've never lost that. I've always envisioned being a business owner and leading a team. So it's, you can listen to a lot of the noise around you. There's some people that are going to be your fans. They don't want to see you succeed. You gotta learn how to take that and shut it out, and take it and learn from it, but maintain that, that passion to succeed and be strong and see your way through it.
That's great.
Yeah. And I was in the first generation to go to college. So, of my family. And so I didn't have a lot of expectation for myself or a lot of, support from older folks in my family or guidance about what a career is. I saw it as a 9-to-5 thing and just went out and did the same 9-to-5 thing. And I feel like for the first 20 years of my career, my wings were clipped and I just didn't know why I felt so suffocated all the time. I never even thought about being an entrepreneur. That was not on my radar. I was lucky I went to college. And so I think I would have told myself to think bigger and to, I would have left sooner, I think, the confines of a 9-to-5 job where I felt suffocated, and really allowed myself to spread my wings a lot sooner. Because now that I feel like I'm at full sprint now. Whereas when I was younger, I just felt so suffocated and caged.
Yeah, I would just say to my younger self, it is very hard to do this. It's extremely hard. But, just keep your passion. Keep your passion, and, despite what you might hear and think, it has more rewards than it does pitfalls.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kate and Ken, thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited about the work that you all are doing and certainly very inspired as well. Website is opeeka.com. That's OPEEKA.com. And you all both are on LinkedIn. What's the best way for people to reach out if they want to learn more about what you all do and maybe implement it in their org?
Yeah, definitely. Well, visit our website for sure, opeeka.com, or email us at info@opeeka.com.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you both very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate it.